Joe Galvin. Please go ahead, Joe.
Thank you. Welcome, everyone. I am Joe Galvin, Chief Research Officer here at Vistage Worldwide, and I'm happy to host the latest webinar in our Peak Performer series. This series is designed to support your leadership climb by bringing the most trusted experts to the Vistage community who provide exceptional insight and best practices to help you navigate the new challenges and possibilities. Today's focus is on the implications of a post-COVID marketplace on marketing strategy, messages, websites, and SEO. Before I introduce our three speakers, I want to quickly share some data to set up the dialogue, if I could. Oops, sorry. It starts with our CEO Confidence Index. This is from March, and it shows the surge in confidence from our members. We'll take this index again, we'll take the survey again in June, and we anticipate that once again it will grow. There is confidence in our community, and it's growing across all continuums. Most importantly, we see that 76% of our CEOs, 3/4 of our CEOs expect increased revenues in the year ahead, and 61% expect increased profits. The economy is booming. We are recovering very rapidly from the COVID experience we've all been through, as we saw in GDP from Q1, and we expect this surge is going to continue. In fact, we see 44% of our CEOs increasing investments. That's on top of the 47% who will continue with their current level of spending. And marketing, following technology, hiring, production, is the number 4 investment that we see our community making in the year ahead, which is why we brought these experts together. We asked this question in our most recent small business survey in May. How do you expect your investment in marketing to change this year? 54% are going to increase the spend in marketing. Why? Because our community is seeking to re-engage and to restart the growth engine and to capitalize on this coming surge that we'll see not just through 21, but through 22, 23, and beyond based on ITR forecasts. Where are you going to be investing? Again, the focus of our show today, digital marketing, website, social, and e-commerce. These are the areas where our community will be investing in marketing. And we thought it only made sense to go into our speaker community and find our top 3 speakers on marketing and bring them together today to have a dialogue on marketing strategy, on marketing thought leadership, SEO, and websites. Joining us today is Karen Haywood. Karen comes to us from Chief Outsiders. She's an author, international speaker, managing partner, also a Vistage member and speaker. Following up Karen will be Thomas Young. Tom is a founder of Intuitive Websites, also a Vistage member and speaker since 2001. And then we'll ask Evan Balin to join us. He's CEO of First Page Sage, best-selling author of 3 books on SEO, and also a Vistage member and speaker. Thank you to all 3 of you for joining us today. Karen, I'm going to turn to you first to get us started talking about marketing strategy.
Well, thank you, Joe. It's great to be here with everyone this morning. I want to start by sharing a trend that has been underway for some time and get grounded there. And this is a chart done by McKinsey that talks about how there is a evolving buyer preference for B2B buyers to self-serve. And if you look at the research stage from 2016 to 2019, there's been an 85% increase in the preference for B2B buyers to go and do all their research online. So they're researching, then they're evaluating the vendors that they want to look at, and the evaluation stage has gone up 285% over 3 years. And some similar growth in the ordering and reordering stage. But what we have here is a fundamental shift in how B2B buyers are wanting to buy their solutions and services. And the interesting thing is that this trend has totally accelerated since COVID-19. So as you'll see on the next slide, McKinsey goes on to show that these companies expect these changes to stick in a permanent way. So what does that mean? That means that B2B leaders, if you want to lead your category, you need to commit to further digitizing your go-to-market plan. You should be able to drive significant competitive advantage with more loyal customers than those of your competitors that are going to lag behind. And so what's exciting today is to really talk about, well, so what do you do and where do you start? My next slide shows really how the marketing and sales funnel has changed, and even more significantly since COVID-19. So if you look at the left-hand side of the chart, we saw that marketing really was accountable for only awareness and interest and maybe driving a little bit of consideration. You know, in today's world, the marketing function really, as we just saw in the last two charts, drives all the way through the funnel to evaluation. So look, so what does that mean? That means that people are deciding whether or not to put you into their evaluation of your product or service before they talk to your salesperson. So when you think about the overweighting of salespeople and typically the underweighting of marketing in mid-market companies, I think we're going to see a fundamental shift. We're going to need more marketing resources because and more marketing focus, frankly, to drive those opportunities for the sales force. And look, this smaller time that the sales force has to interact with their buyer means that, you know, they have a shorter time to get that relationship going, and there are some implications for their sales process. But more than that, buyers are coming to these discussions much more informed, much more educated. So you're going to really have to think through what your sales enablement needs to look like. On the next slide, I have some predictions. So at Chief Outsiders, we're 80 CMOs who spend a lot of time in the mid-market community. We've served over 1,000 clients. And I went to them and said, so what are our top predictions for what's going to be permanently changed? And these three main topics were really the essence of the feedback I got. So number one is the rapid acceleration of consumers and B2B customers accessing content. So, you know, what Evan's going to talk about is going to be so germane to dealing with that. The second thing is that marketing even owns more of the sales process than it did before. So buying has become completely digitized. And so Thomas in the next section is going to talk about, you know, what does that mean for how you put your websites together? And the third major point, and we see this exponentially, certainly over the last 7 years since I've been at Chief Outsiders, businesses are shifting to see that they can expand their markets exponentially. And marketing generalists are becoming a dinosaur. So, you know, today there is no full stack CMO, and strategy really has to be done in terms of in parallel with performance marketing. And I want to make a point and give you an example of how businesses are shifting to see how they can expand their markets. With this whole movement online, businesses traditionally have said, well, you know, this is the geography I serve. COVID has busted open geographies. There's a church in Southern California that served its local community. It went online, put a digital strategy, not random acts of marketing, a strategy in place to drive more attendance, and they reached.
No, so it didn't do automatically.
I put auto reconnect.
A million. They now reached 1 million customers. And on the next slide, I want to just shape what's going to come with Thomas and Evan and say, if you want to have really good marketing execution, which is your website, your SEO, your lead generation, it really needs to be informed by Big M marketing on the next slide, which is our insight. What is it we know about our company, our customers, and our competition that then informs the strategy? So how are we different? How are we positioning ourselves against the competitors? What do we need to do in pricing? How do we segment our markets? If you get your strategy right, you'll see on the next slide that execution really works. So there is no magic pill, but there are best practices, and there are 3 gears that you should think about. If you want really great execution, that should be informed by a strategy, and the strategy should be informed by insights. Insights about your customers and how their needs have changed since COVID, how the way they want to buy has changed since COVID, what your competitors are up to, because they're still moving. So we need to understand what they're doing. And then finally, how do you really leverage the strengths of your company into an active strategy that then you can execute and you know will work.
Karen, that was very powerful and very concise. Thank you so much for sharing that with everyone. Before I give Evan and Thomas a chance to jump in and probe and ask a few questions, I had one that I wanted to bring up only because it didn't come through in your conversation. It's one that came from our community. It has to do with trade shows.
Okay.
Trade shows were the staple of many organizations in a pre-COVID world. We're now moving quickly to this post-COVID new reality. How are trade shows going to evolve, and what is that going to look like?
Well, I think trade shows are still going to play a role in people's go-to-market strategies. I think that if I were to advise someone on how to build a trade show strategy, you have to focus first of all on what's the ROI and how are you going to have a plan with the right message that's going to resonate to get the metrics in place that really justify the investment. I've heard so many companies when I'm out speaking talk about, well, we just feel like we have to be there. No, you don't have to be there. You need to think about how you can have that generate revenue for yourself. And that really goes to how do you promote it ahead of the event? How do you have, and you'll hear from Tom on landing pages and Evan on SEO, how do you have a system for collecting data so that when you're at the trade show, you can score lead opportunities, you can generate and get them into your CRM system. And you can score them on, how hot a lead they were and assign them and, continue to drip on them and build your database. So I think, there's going to be an acceleration of a digital element towards driving traffic and then post trade show follow-up. We were participating in a trade show just last week that had 800 people. So we're really starting to see them come back online. I think people have to really focus on making sure they get the right ROI.
So you think that trade shows will exist in the new reality of a post-COVID world, but the
I do.
strategy has to change?
Yeah, I think the strategy is going to evolve. And I think you should be judicious on where you spend your money on trade shows and do it with purpose and ROI.
Great, thank you. Gentlemen, questions for Karen?
Karen, one thing that I was struck by is just how much of the burden of evaluation is being taken on by the customer, from what you were saying earlier on. And I'm curious what you've found or what your CMOs have found people are trusting. What medium are they trusting? Are they going to Google and just looking at the first result? Are they, going to trade periodicals? Are they, learning things in webinars? I mean, there's so much information out there. What do people tend to trust?
Well, I think, the first thing is people go to their peers, right? So you're going to trust your peers. You're going to go to LinkedIn. You're going to look for some input. But beyond that, I think it's those that really have authentic content that is relevant to the questions they have. And so, being very thoughtful about how the content supports each stage and the questions that they have at each stage of how they're thinking about the evaluation of their product or whether they're considering it. So I think content that is technical and meaningful. And then I think customer testimonials are going to be really important, and video, lots and lots and lots of video with authentic people talking about their positive experience.
Karen, as you describe that, I think about that the buyer's journey hasn't fundamentally changed. What has changed is where and how they source that information, and where the salesperson or the sales resource, whatever that we would, come into that decision-making process in order to answer questions that buyer can no longer acquire independent of them.
Absolutely.
Karen, I've got a quick question about that to follow. Can follow up on that, and that's the idea of where do you see the salespeople functioning in the funnel now that their role is changing?
Well, I think it depends, on how considered a purchase is. So, there's still going to be a role for salespeople. I think the way people interact on Zoom in a sales function is going to change. They're coming in, as we said, later in the funnel. So that means they're going to have to be far more enabled. You're going to have sales enablement tools that engage customers. But I think there's still going to be a big role for salespeople, especially in, very considered purchases of, big ticket B2B solutions where there's got to be a dialogue where the buyer can't really get everything they want out of the content. They need someone to help sort of collaborate them through the discussion. But we're moving much less from a pitch mode to a discovery and an interactive support of how the buyer wants to go through their evaluation process.
We have a concept we call it the knowledge inflection point.
Yeah.
It's somewhere in that buyer's journey where the buyer can no longer satisfy their need for information. It may be something as simple as order, availability, ship date, and arrival. Or it may be as complex as how do I customize, how do I configure, how do I integrate on a product to solution continuum. And I think that's what you're speaking to, is that marketing is taking a much greater role in providing that information, which means sales, when they do enter, they have to be able to add or complement to what the buyer's already received and generate original insight, thought, and perspective to help them complete that purchase.
Yeah, and that's why it's so important for B2B businesses and B2C businesses to really understand the voice of their customer and get those insights into how their buyers have changed, and whether it's win-loss analysis, whether it's, figuring out your buyer personas. There's a lot of strategy work that needs to be done up front to really understand how you can better serve them and how you can win the digital war against your competitors.
Gentlemen, follow-ups?
It's great stuff. I mean, I always, in my talks, my Vistage talks, I mentioned that you will now be talking to leads that know more than your salesperson knows.
Yeah.
So that's a very different conversation. And if the salesperson has the mentality that they still have to educate and teach people, that's not going to be good. They're going to take them down the wrong path.
Yeah.
And there's nothing worse than a conflicted message from what you might see in a digital world, marketing content that's shipped to you. And then when the salesperson jumps in and says a third story, the confusion it will create is only going to dilute the buying process.
That's right.
Yeah. Well, Karen, thank you very much. That was excellent. We'll look forward to coming back at the end and learning more from you. But let's shift now to Tom Young. Tom, digital marketing. I'll turn it over to you and share with us some insight, please.
Well, when I think of digital marketing, when I present on digital marketing, I think of content. And so we're going to spend quite a bit of time on content. And of course, your content will be on your website. It'll be in your social media and your blog posts, your email marketing. So digital marketing today is really about how is your content presented. And I know that you're getting a lot of information in this webinar. So I just want to say one very, very important thing. If your content's not clear and direct, it won't work. And I still see this today when I look at Vistage websites, is we still are writing content that I don't think people are getting or understanding. So number one has to be, any content you present through digital has to be very clear and very direct. And the impact of COVID today has made it so important that that content shows empathy, understanding, and a pillar of knowledge for your target market. And this is something that ties into the idea that not only must it be understood, but also you have to understand where these folks are in dealing with COVID. And to do that, and to best do that, you want to think about the concepts of storytelling in your content. So when you think about the concept of storytelling, there's lots of great resources for that, by the way. A favorite of mine is Story Brand by Donald Miller. But when you think about telling a story, I want you to think about placing your customer as the hero, and you are the guide that's going to either enhance the quality of their life or help them solve a problem, right? And to do that, you have to focus on benefits. You have to focus on problem-solving content. So, we talked earlier about the idea of investing in marketing, investing dollars in marketing. I think the challenge right now, today in marketing, is investing your time and your own personal knowledge and understanding very clearly the benefits and problems that your company solves. And to put another layer upon that, you have to understand that from multiple market segments, because many Vistage members have websites that have several different market segments that will hit that website. But the core of what you provide, the core benefits and problems you solve must be very clear. And it starts with your website homepage. And it starts with the idea that you have to know, what are your pillars of thought leadership? Pillars of thought leadership are the things that your company does really well in the marketplace. And you can even write these up in your marketing plan. These are our pillars of thought leadership. We are really good at A, B, C, and D. And everything we're going to do now in our content focus will be around what we're really good at doing, the problems we're good at solving. Unfortunately, too many of us are still focused on talking about ourselves, talking about how great our company is, the history of our company, our services and products are great, and so forth. And that's fine. They are great. And we'll get to those. But first, we want to talk about benefits and solving problems for customers. So when we do that, and as you put this content together, the content will express itself through your website. And in looking at Google Analytics data, and I've seen Google Analytics data on thousands of websites, the home page of your website will almost always be the most popular landing page. And in many cases, the first experience people have with your brand. In fact, Evan asked a question about channels, and Karen talked about trust in the channels, right? When you look at Google Analytics data like I do, and you look at across platforms, B2B, B2C, what you'll find is where we are today in 2021 is that about half of the people experience your brand start on Google. And then another probably 20 to 25% experience it through social media channels. And then another 20 to 25% experience it from other websites, referrals from other websites or from influencers, right? So when you think about that, you got to realize that so many people are going to hit your homepage of your website, and they're going to start their experience of your brand from your homepage. To do that, you want to design for your target audience. And what I see in a trend happening right now is many websites are designed with the idea of the company in mind or the designer. We don't want to do that. We want to design for the target audience. And build a website you can edit. Build a website. We use WordPress, but build a website you can edit, and hopefully a website you can own. And Evan's going to talk about this as well, but there is a very straightforward formula that if you have more content on your website, you will get more traffic. And for those of you using Google Ads as a channel and Google Ads can be very, very effective, but what we found is that Google Ads will only be effective post-COVID if you have landing pages for those ads. So if you know the user intent for the ad, the landing page must be in a perfect alignment for that user intent. If you send people to your homepage with your ads and the user intent varies and is mixed, then you'll see less conversions. So what I'm going to give you today, and this is really at the heart of my presentation with you today, is what should this flow look like on the homepage and on your landing pages? And I've worked on this for many, many years, and I've pulled concepts from different places, and we've tested this, and it works. Over the last 2 or 3 years, we've seen incredible conversions when we use this format for your homepage and for your landing pages. The reason this works is because it puts the website user in the position of the hero and you in the position of the guide. And it doesn't matter if it's B2B or B2C, this is how it works. People will always look at your navigation first. They'll want to make sure navigation is simple and easy to follow. Then they will come and look at your tagline in your header. And there needs to be alignment between the tagline and the photo in your header. The tagline has to be very direct and clear, and it has to meet the 10 out of 10 rule. So once again, if there's only 1 or 2 things you get from today's presentation, I want you to get this, and that is that 10 out of 10 people coming to your website must understand what you're saying, what you do, and the value they can get. And the reason that's becoming more important in COVID is because there's less networking happening, and the impact of influencers and referrals online is so critical. And also, when researchers get confused, they tend to stop researching. So they'll leave your website if they're not getting it. Now, I've had Vistage members tell me, well, if they don't understand my website, I don't want them there. But I want to challenge that belief, because there's no downside for people understanding your website. There's only upside. Then you want to have CTAs, and the CTAs are real important. Now, Karen mentioned the research, and that's very powerful stuff. But keep in mind that if you only have CTAs at the bottom of the funnel, which basically say, talk to a sales rep right now, talk to somebody, you will lose conversions. You've got to have CTAs that are in the middle of the funnel. That's why webinars, ebooks, gated content, and so forth are still incredibly important. Now, before you talk about your services and your products on these landing pages, you want to talk about the benefits and the stakes. What are the risks if they don't work with you? And what are the benefits if they do? then talk about your services and products, then talk about your plan. What's it like to onboard with you? What's it like to get started with you? Is it easy? Is it difficult? Is it makes straightforward sense to get started with you? Do you have a plan? If they are the hero, every hero has a guide. You are the guide, so show them the plan. And then reinforce yourself as the guide with testimonials, your client logos you've worked with, perhaps case studies, and featured resources like your blog and white papers and so forth, webinars. This website landing flow is a lot of work, but it's not expensive. This is work that you do with your team, planning it out. In fact, a lot of the stuff I'm going to talk about today is not incredibly expensive. In fact, let's go look at marketing automation, because when I think of trade shows and the solution to what do you do about trade shows, well, why do you go to a trade show? You go to a trade show to get leads. If you're going to a trade show to do branding, then I would question why you're there, because you can do branding online at a much, much higher clip. You'll reach a lot more people, right? You go to a trade show to get leads. The biggest mistake Vistage members make by far is going to a trade show and not following up on the leads. And the reason they don't follow up on the leads is because they're very top of funnel. So if you go to a trade show and you have several thousand people there and you come home with 200 great qualified leads and everybody follows up and you get silence. Why? Why do you get silence? You get silence because you're not dealing with them at where they are in their funnel. They're very top of funnel in their research. So how do you get them engaged? They don't want to talk to a sales rep. We saw that already in Karen's funnel. What they want to do is they want to research you. So this is where marketing automation comes in. And it's time to get serious about this. So I mentioned earlier that about half of your folks will come from Google searches and from Google. Well, a lot of people will come to you from email. Now, email marketing is part of marketing automation. Now, the thing I want to say about email marketing is that not everyone will open your emails, and that's just a fact. If you can get 30% of folks to open your emails, you're doing really well. But if you're going to work the funnel, you've got to have a CRM. You've got to have a tool like HubSpot. We're big HubSpot fans, but there's many tools out there. You have to have a tool like this that's working that funnel. So when people attend a trade show or visit you and want to look at your white paper or attend a webinar, you have a way of staying in touch with them. Now, the key thing that tends to fall apart in the sales funnel is that we don't assign people to each stage of the funnel. And this is critical in getting the sales team motivated and activated on the funnel when people want to be anonymous and not talk to someone. And the final thing I want to say on this slide is that for you as a business leader, your awareness of the data that's generated by marketing automation will drive sales. You're looking at the data and asking questions will get the team moving in the right direction. And that's also true of Google Analytics, the Google Search Console, and other great tools that are out there that you should be watching and asking questions about. Data drives awareness, awareness drives change, which leads to sales growth. And be ready for that sales growth because it's coming. And I talked a little bit about this already, but the idea of bringing your sales and marketing team together to work on that funnel is critical. In fact, I'm writing a book on this topic with Carl Becker, who just had a book released as well. And Carl and I are working on this concept of how do you tactically bring together sales and marketing people to deal with this new funnel. And the key is very simple and straightforward. You've got to combine the efforts through combined mission and values on the teams, through meetings where they come together, through using tools and tactics like Traction to run the meetings, and then having the understanding and idea that as you start to align the objectives of sales and marketing, there will be cross off and changes in what they can do in the funnel. For example, you might find you have salespeople that are great at content, and you might find that you have marketing folks, that are great at putting on webinars and doing middle of funnel tactics. Assign people to the funnel, and then you'll see movement. And I want to just talk briefly about one more thing that tends to be the missing piece in many of Vistage companies' digital marketing plans, and it's the power of influencers. So what I've seen over the years in presenting to Vistage groups is that there are Vistage members out there that have fantastic websites and they're multi-million-dollar e-commerce companies, right? Doing great online. Then there's also Vistage members that have websites that were done in 2005 and they haven't touched them. So it's a big, wide spectrum. One of the things I find across all those spectrums is we can do more with influencers. We can do more with influencers. And COVID has really killed in-person networking. We hope that comes back. But even the idea of business cards, what's happened to business cards? We used to have business cards. All of that's changing now, and COVID has changed that. So your work with influencers now is your online networking. And I would encourage you to proactively build a database of influencers that are part of your segments in your marketing automation and your email campaigns. And you proactively go after influencers. The funnel for influencers is a bit different. You have to be more proactive. They may not research you as much, but if you have value content, if you have content of value and you're in touch with your benefits and your pillars of content knowledge, influencers would want to work with you because influencers need your content, and that helps drive what they do. And real quick, I want to define an influencer. Influencers can be anyone who refers to your brand. So it could be the media through PR. It could be other websites. It could be folks on social media. All of this has changed through COVID. There are influencers on social media right now that can impact your company much more than an article in the Wall Street Journal or an article in CNN, because those influencers have the ears of your target market, and that's much more powerful. So a lot to think about with content, a lot to think about. I just want to leave you with the idea that know what you're really good at doing. At the heart of all your strategy will come when you know what you're really good at doing, you understand your benefits and the pain that you solve and the benefits you provide to your target market.
Tom, that was really enlightening. Thank you. A quick question from me before we go to Karen and Evan is, you described the website and the journey all in the context of a prospective customer. We know that 75% of our revenues come from existing customers. Do I create a separate website for my customers? It's got a different flow, a different experience. How do customers interact with websites is maybe the core question.
Well, and I talk about this in my presentation, is the idea that once they research you and have gone through all that trouble and they select you, you've got to keep them loyal to your brand. The last thing you want them to do is to start a research process again. Now, a lot of brand loyalty comes from human interaction, relationships, and so forth. But yes, as part of your marketing automation, you should have that segment of customers in there so you can communicate to them, because they're going to want to see ongoing value. And there is nothing better than thought leadership value that you provide to your customers on an ongoing basis, in a medium they can take it in. So absolutely, loyalty is really critical. Now, there is a trend with websites, and HubSpot's doing this, where you can serve up content based on the IP address of the user, right? And so if you can start to do that now. So if you have customers going back to your website and you're in the HubSpot platform, you can serve up content based on their customer segmentation and what industry they're in. But for the most part, I mean, in the real day world of what most Vistage companies deal with, you keep customers loyal to you because of the relationship with your company. Marketing automation can be used to enhance that because they get great pieces of content as well.
Excellent, thank you. Karen, Evan?
Well, I'd love to hear your thoughts, Tom, on mobility and people, accessing your website from mobile devices and the implications of being good at it and not being good at it.
It is so important. And here is the most fascinating trend that we saw during COVID. Mobile usage went up. So I was thinking, well, people are at home now, they'll get on their laptops, they'll get on their desktops, but we did not see a decrease in mobile traffic. So what people are doing is they're using their mobile devices, even working at home. They're using their mobile devices wherever they are. So mobile devices are here to stay. What I would stress to you all is think of it in terms of screen size for the website experience, and make sure you're using responsive themes. And you have got to go look at your website on different devices and different screen sizes. Work with your developer on that. We use WordPress, and we use WordPress plugins and themes that are all adaptable. So it's not incredibly expensive to be adaptable, but go look at your devices. And of course, you can see all that in Google Analytics. All that data is available as well.
I have a brief question. One of the things I hear most when I give a talk is like, okay, storytelling's important and segmenting content to the right target audience is important, but who writes this? Is this an internal person? Do I outsource this? Who's going to be this magic person capable of doing all of this?
It's such a great question. Most Vistage CEOs don't like to write. You didn't like to write in school and in college. You don't like to write now. So you're not going to be writing that content. And more than likely, you will not have a content writer on your team. And even if you did, it probably is not a justified position. So content writing for digital is more than likely something you're going to outsource. And there's great resources for that, writersaccess.com, Verblio, and so forth. And I know with Evan's company, if you want to take your content to another level and really make it fantastic and then apply it to SEO, then you would be talking to Evan, right? What we do is we work with a group of content writers that can get the content posted. Now, here's the thing about content writers, and this is something that's non-intuitive for most people, that they can learn your industry. Most writers that are out there now have a journalism background. They can write on any topic, but give them some time. They're going to take 1 or 2 posts before they really learn your industry, but they will be able to write about your industry probably better than anyone on your team. If you give them the time, give them a couple blog posts to work with, and you'll see that happen.
Great, thank you. Tom, thank you so much. Let's move on to Evan. Evan, please share with us your thoughts on SEO and thought leadership as well.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, there's some things that we've already covered pretty well about the changes since COVID and how much people are spending digitally. That part I think is pretty well established. But something I think about a lot is that so many companies are now competing, spending more money on ads and other forms of, essentially digital advertising in its many forms. And that's making things very expensive. So I'm a huge fan, and this is the reason I've dedicated my career to it, of the organic side of marketing, where the currency is not dollars. You're not trading dollars to an ad company like Google and in exchange getting exposure. The currency is creativity and hard work, essentially. Now that can be outsourced, or you can find that right person on your team who can write phenomenal content that tells a good story like Tom was talking about, or answers the question exceptionally well. So I would say the currency of creativity, of hiring people that are thoughtful and can create a piece of content that really addresses the thing that the person searched, the keyword, particularly well. That's very hard to do. I don't see it a lot. And it's only because people aren't really taking the time to put themselves in the mind frame of the customer, just like Tom was talking about. And not just the customer, but what is the specific thing they're interested in, their problem, or the service that they're seeking out. This is all right there for you to do. You just need somebody to think about that, really focus on. So I want to just go over SEO and its history a little bit, not in any great detail, of course. This will be about 1 minute. When I started doing SEO in the early 2000s, basically you could buy links and stuff keywords into pages. And it was basically, you could call it a technical game, but it wasn't as sophisticated as it is today. Almost anybody could buy their way to the top. And I've been in this industry long enough to see these shifts, and I just found them fascinating. Somewhere around 2007, if you put a stock image at the top of a blog entry and then wrote 500 words that were halfway decent, you're going to rank. It was basically the era of content getting you leads through SEO beginning. So basically, if you wrote about all the different topics that your various target audiences were interested in, that was enough. And then the web started to become inundated, and there was content in every single niche. And basically, there was a point of saturation. And this is where HubSpot heralded something that I just remember when I saw it, I was like, wow, this is fascinating. They would write these really long, well-organized articles that really fully answered the question that is inherent in the keyword that somebody was typing into Google. And as a result, they would be #1 on Google for anything that they targeted. And this is how their origins were basically a company that focused on SEO before they became CRM and marketing automation and all the stuff they do. And today, that is what works. It is the simplest thing in the world, and yet tough to execute because of all the thoughtfulness and creativity involved, which is basically you want to take every single search term that is commercially valuable, that would make your company money, and write a phenomenal page on it. And I don't just mean assign somebody to write a page on it. I mean, write the best piece of content that has been published on the internet, targeting the intent behind that keyword. And that sounds like a huge amount of work. It is a bunch of work, but it's one piece at a time. Somebody spends 3-4 hours really thinking about a search keyword and then writing something fantastic, and you bring in a graphic designer, really enhance it. It's enormously powerful. So on the next slide, I am going to this is basically a pie chart, and you guys will get this exact presentation, but this is Google's algorithm in 2021. And the main takeaway from this is that you want to create a different page on your website for every single keyword that is commercially valuable. So you want to start essentially with a keyword table, which I'm going to get to in a moment, where you're just rank ordering your most valuable keywords that are going to bring revenue to your company, or MQLs to your company, which then lead to revenue. And you want to make sure the meta page title, the title of the page, contains the keyword. I would say 90% of Vistage companies do not pay attention to their meta page titles. It's fascinating to me. It's SEO 101, and it's the main takeaway every single talk that I give. So that's the main thing. And then having a different page that's really well written is critical. And then what we see more and more is what's called hub and spoke SEO, where essentially you need lots of pages that are all focused around the same hub of a keyword. So I'll get into that in a moment. Actually, let's go to the next slide and I'll show you exactly what I mean. SEO, if you're going to really succeed at it, starts with good planning, like most things. And if I'm trying to rank for all kinds of, if I'm a nearshore outsourcing firm, okay, I want to start with the biggest keyword. And I don't even care if I rank just for nearshore outsourcing. That's a big enough keyword that it's not quite transactional. It's more like some people want to know what it is. It's not that valuable of a term in and of itself. But when you get to the transactional phrases where you add the word company to nearshore outsourcing, services, companies, benefits, these sound like almost the same keywords, but they're totally different, each one. A plural keyword, like nearshore outsourcing companies, means I want a comparison. It has a different search intent behind it. And a singular phrase means I want the best. Show me the best, Google. So if you plan with something like this, and you know the right page to welcome a searcher who typed that in, really focusing on their search intent, and then you basically say, what's the way that I'm going to create the best piece of content on the internet targeting this term? Do that systematically, you will find your website at the top. And I'm going to show some examples. If we go to the next slide. So I'm going to show 3 examples that we've done on our own website. The first is a simple FAQ. So a Vistage chair after a talk one day said, how do I get more members in my group? So I said, well, what are people typing in when they're close to joining Vistage, but they're not quite there? And we came up with the term, is Vistage worth it, or Vistage review. So I wrote an article called, is Vistage worth it? An honest review. Doesn't help my company and all, but I do it as an example. And basically, if you go to Google and you type in, is Vistage worth it, which is a fairly popular term, or if you type in Vistage review, it's been #1 for years, and I haven't done anything to it. And if you just type in Vistage, it's #2. It's just below vistage.com. So it's defining the brand of Vistage, and it's just my random opinion. And any of you can do the same exact thing. All I've done, if we go back to the actual article, is think really carefully about what somebody means when they type in Vistage review. And essentially they mean, is this worth it? How much does it cost? What's it like? You have to do the hard work of thinking of the questions they didn't even know they had and answer those. Who is it right for? Who's it not right for? Next example, a different type of really valuable SEO page is an industry-focused page. If you want to say, I'm particularly good in this industry. So one of the areas that we like to attract customers in, B2B SaaS. So we create a page just about B2B SaaS SEO company. If you type that in, it's #1. I haven't promoted it or anything. Just wrote a super long, thorough page with statistics, original research, graphic design, anything that we can put in there to make it a fantastic page. And then the last example is a geo-targeted page. So I'm in Berkeley right now. We're a remote company. We work from anywhere. We do SEO the same way in any part of the country. And yet we position ourselves as a Silicon Valley SEO company, a Boston SEO company, a New York SEO company. This is just an example of the Silicon Valley page. Type in SEO company Silicon Valley, and you'll see us above companies that are actually in Silicon Valley. Why? Because we actually took the time, and they didn't, to write an extremely focused landing page that shows the clients we have that are located in Silicon Valley. It talks about the coffee shop in Silicon Valley that I'd like to meet you at and have a sales conversation with you. So it's just highly specific. So that's essentially how to do SEO the right way today.
Wow, Evan, that was outstanding. I mean, that was just so enlightening about the power of SEO and the power of a single person, you, for example, writing a story about Vistage and how Vistage is meaningful and how it pops up. And again, when we talk about, come back to where Karen and Tom also spoke about, how in the buyer's journey, how they're self-educating, self-informing, even more so than ever before, it really connects at a powerful level to what's really happening out there. Thank you for that. Karen and Tom, you guys got some questions you want to probe on here?
Yeah, Evan, it would be great if you could talk about the metrics that people ought to focus on when they're doing SEO. What, you know, and the reason I ask that is because I think this, you know, sometimes there are just so many metrics out there that we lose the ones we should actually be focusing on. What are your
Totally
thoughts?
agree. And I think there's all this misinformation about SEO, and basically every web design company says they do SEO. And what happens is a lot of people think that the correct metric for SEO is organic traffic, which it absolutely isn't. That's an interesting leading indicator, but that's not a good metric. It's just something that you should know. Keyword rankings is one clear way to know if you're doing well. You know, you start with the keywords that you want to rank for, that you agree are commercially valuable. You put into that table like the one that I had in a previous slide, and that's a good leading indicator, but that's not the metric you care most about. The metric you care most about are qualified leads. Marketing qualified leads is usually the one that we use in my company. And we want to be judged by the yardstick of revenue. So Tom was talking about the power of marketing automation, something like HubSpot or Salesforce. You can track click paths and where people came from. And even if they left and then came back in through LinkedIn or something like that, you can track that. You can set up marketing attribution and give credit to different sources. So ultimately, the yardstick for SEO should be new revenue generated by SEO versus the cost. And you should be doing you know, the type of marketing where you're comparing the lifetime value of a customer to the cost that it required to gain that customer. So lifetime value of a customer, you know, is usually put next to customer acquisition cost, and you try to get like a 4-to-1 or you know, higher ratio, so you're not paying that much for a customer relative to what they're worth.
Thank
It's
you.
great content, Evan. I love the idea of best content on the internet. I love that. And you know what's interesting? You can go see what's there now. The internet's wide open. Go do a search and you'll see, well, who's best right now, and you can do it better than they do it. You can do that with your homepage website or your site too. Go look at your homepage, look at your competitors' homepages. One of the questions that I get asked all the time when I present is, what's up with Google? Are they going to change everything? What's with the algorithms? I hear something big is happening with Google. What are your thoughts about the changes Google makes in their algorithm?
There's not much in terms of changes. If you're actually just doing what I'm saying and writing the best content on the internet, or at least very good content, but I like to shoot for the best, for each keyword, and you begin with the keywords and not just writing about something interesting or covering the different services or products you offer, but instead look first at the keywords that your customers search and then generate content based on that list, then you will always do well. And you would have done well in 2001, and you're doing very well in 2021. There have been changes over the years that have to do with page speed, mobility, and security and personalization of search. Those 4 areas are the only major changes in Google's algorithm. And I also just want to briefly speak to your first point about the best content on the internet. I'm not exaggerating when I say that. Take it as a challenge. You got to think big. That is actually just a concept that I think that the marketing leaders in the company need to say to anyone writing content. Think big. Hire a graphic designer. Do a little bit of research, just at least internally, and create something that is better than the #1 result. Why not challenge yourself to that? That's how you're going to get to #1, is doing that at scale.
Well, a lot of Vistage companies that I present to, it's not uncommon for me to hear that they are the leader in their space.
Right.
I mean, you hear that all the time, or they're one of the top 3 leaders in their space. And then you look at their website, you realize, well, the website does not reflect your leadership, right? And leadership is reflected with content when it all boils down to it. Really good stuff. What are your thoughts about, so a lot of folks that I present to struggle sometimes to understand keywords. I mean, you know, you and I live this, so we know what keywords are. But I think what you said is so important. It's keywords that your customers use to search, not keywords that you or your team use to search. And what are your thoughts about that? And also the Search Console, using the Search Console to get keyword data.
I think that the best way to find keywords is to just go to google.com and use the wonderful feature that they put right out there for everybody to see, autofill. You
Powerful.
start with the theme of your industry, like I had nearshore outsourcing. Start there, and then just look at the drop-down list of 10, and you're going to find like one or two, and say, "Oh, that's giving me ideas." People are typing in nearshore outsourcing solutions. I wouldn't have thought that. I thought they just said companies and services, but they type in solutions. What do they mean by that? And then you can go down a rabbit hole, and you can type every letter of the alphabet and see what the Google Auto Suggest tells you. And I like to start there, and then just come up with a big list, and then rank order them by. I think this is going to bring new revenue to the company. But I love Google Search Console, SEMrush, Moz. There's all these different tools out there that will help you with keywords. But I like to start there and just have a lot of good quality thinking around it. And I find that ends up working better in terms of investing in the right keywords.
It's incredible because the user intent. So if you do a term that you think is important, you only think it's important, you got to understand the user intent behind the search terms.
Indeed. Yeah.
On the topic of content marketing, I'm sorry, Karen, go ahead, please.
I just have a quick question. If I'm a CEO sitting out here listening to, okay, I got to get this great content. I got to have a great website. By the way, I need a strategy that even says, what are we good at? How long does it take? Let's say you got this great content. We've got our website, so that it makes Google happy. How long does it take for results?
For SEO results?
Yeah.
Typically it's 4 to 6 months if you are publishing 2 new pages every week on your website, which is a fairly high bar. But if you want to know what really works, we found sometimes once a week publishing works, but twice a week always works. And then you just have to be patient, because the organic side of Google, SEO, is different from advertising, in that advertising is like renting a house. You can live there on day one. You just give the money and you can live there, but you don't own it. With Google, you're investing, you're creating content that Google likes, and then Google's promoting you to the top of the results. It's like owning. So
it's like the gift that keeps on giving.
It's the gift that keeps on giving, but you have to have patience. That 4 to 6 months is difficult for some CEOs or CMOs. But if you understand how valuable it is, it's not going to be that difficult ultimately.
That's especially true for the most valuable keywords, which have the best return. We've seen that if you submit your site through Google, through the Search Console, long tail keywords, you can show up almost immediately. It's amazing. And also in YouTube, if you're doing YouTube's videos and doing some marketing in YouTube, you can be found within just a few minutes of posting your video and tagging it properly. But the bigger terms that require more time and effort also have the biggest return. So those are the ones to look for too.
What are some of the most powerful forms of content when we talk about writing the best piece of content? But do we see videos, podcasts, webinars, something like this, blog? What are the most impactful forms of content to push thought leadership through?
Well, yeah, it's a great question. I think that digital marketing is incremental in its growth. So basically, you have to understand where your target market is hanging out on the internet. Are they on your website, right? But for the most part, it's going to be website content and blogs, email marketing, and social media content. Those are really the biggest, most effective channels. YouTube and videos are most effective on YouTube. People on websites, they don't watch videos at a rate we'd like, but man, do they watch videos on YouTube. So that's more or less where those channels are. But after a while, you'll capture the main channels, and then incremental growth comes from like improving your presence in LinkedIn, improving your content on Instagram, perhaps pursuing Pinterest as a channel if you're B2C, right? So it's all incremental growth in those channels.
Yeah, another question that came in is, we talked about influencers, right? And the role of influencers. Karen, you talk about referrals and how important that is, and people talking about, how do you find these influencers, and how do you determine who is an influencer and who's a poser, for lack of a better word?
I'd love to answer that question. I think this is exactly where strategy becomes critical. You have to go back to who are your ideal customers, like look in your company and who are the ideal customers, and then go out and do a win study with them. Why did they come to you? What was it that they loved about you? And where did they find out about you? Who influenced them? Where did they get their information? If they got their information from, a Vistage research report, then you ought to figure out how to connect with Vistage. So I think it's the customers always have the answers. So getting that insight from your customers about where they get their information, who they rely on, how they think about it, what was it that they evaluated, and then what did they get from their competitors, from your competitors as well. But it really starts with mining the voice of the customer.
It's a great point. And to kind of what Evan was talking about, you can actually do a search in Google, influencers, and then put your industry in, and Google will display influencers in your industry. And then you can go look at their LinkedIn pages, their Facebook pages, see how many followers they have. And many of the influencers will be media that you recognize, and associations, trade shows that you recognize, and so forth.
And I hate to be cheeky, but I can add that you can make your own website rank at the top for influencers in your industry, and then just put people from your organization in there as well. That's kind of, that's the power of SEO. But that gets into, I think, the interesting topic of what you trust, which websites you trust.
Well, it also leads to which influencers do you trust? Because a lot of marketing interns pose as influencers writing marketing type content versus, people that truly have experience and knowledge and real perspectives in the industry. And it's challenging. One of the questions, we got a bunch here, we're not going to get to all of them, was, you're overwhelmed with so much stuff anyway. And people tend to push stuff. How do you discern between what you really want to push and how it connects to your brand versus just meeting the requirement, Evan, you said, of 2 pieces a week?
Yeah, it's critical. I mean, so if you want to rise above the digital noise, it's going to be in that sweet spot between what your company does really, really well, the benefits you provide, and the needs that your customers have. Because there's so much noise out there, when they find that benefit and they have that connection, then they'll pursue you in their research.
They get that dopamine buzz, right?
They do. And they're like, finally found a company I can reach out to.
And what's really interesting in the work we've done with Vistage companies is you'll talk to a CEO and you'll say, well, what do you think are the real strengths of your company? And, it could be, well, we're innovative. We're the most innovative company. And this happens to be an IT services company. And then you go to their customers and you say, what is it you value about this company? Why did you choose to do business with them? And the customers then turn around and say, well, they have the best antivirus, they protect our environment, they have the best white glove customer service when we call. It has nothing to do with innovation. In fact, when you start to go down and you interview how they went through their buyer's journey, the CFO, who's a decision maker, at least a major stakeholder in every case, says, oh no, we don't want innovation. We just want to manage and protect the environment. We're not looking for anything leading edge. So often in the work we do, what the CEO and the leadership team thinks are their big strengths are not what the customers value in the relationships. So they're talking by each other. So getting your message out is about being super relevant. And I think Tom said it well, what is it you do better than everything else? And I would add that your customers value you for.
Voice of the customer once again.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I would just add one other thing to both those fantastic points, which is that the content on the page needs to be skimmable. Nobody here is reading long paragraphs of things unless it's like a phenomenal story, you're reading it for pleasure. There has to be attention to white space. There has to be, icons on landing pages and stuff like that. Get to the point, put the information in a table, answer the question immediately that's inherent in the search, like at the very top, and then say, give more detail below. I mean, you really have to keep in mind, there's so much information. We're all basically competing for attention at this point. And that's what you are too. In an inundated world of information, you have to make it so if someone lands on your site, they get to the point of what they want very, very quickly. So that itself is an art.
Right. Well, before we go, I have one more question one more comment I wanted each of you is, which is, and Karen, we'll start with you, but what is the number one recommendation you would give to a CEO for marketing in a post-COVID market? You're on mute, Karen.
Yeah, I think the big thing I'd say is whatever you were doing digitally before, you really have to be 2 times more digital. And that starts with figuring out 2 things: how your buyers' needs have changed through COVID, and how the way they want to buy has changed through COVID. And I think that is the starting point to really unleash a powerful plan going
Karen,
forward.
thank you so much for being here today and sharing that. Tom, let's turn to you.
Oh, this is great. The information was fantastic, guys. Thank you so much. I would say that the number one thing for CEOs to do, and this is what the best marketers on the planet do, is they live inside the head of their customer.
Yeah.
You don't live, if you live inside your own head, you're one of the worst marketers on the planet. But if you want to be the best marketer on the planet, live inside the head of your customers. It'll be worthwhile.
Great, thank you very much. And Evan?
I would say when you're writing content for your website or somebody is writing it, start with keywords, not with topics. Figure out what people are already interested in, and then write to those exact phrases and answer them as well as possible.
Well, Karen, Tom, and Evan, thank you so much for your expertise and insights today. We look forward to having you back in the very near future to elaborate and continue on this dialogue. So thank you very much for your time today. I'd like to thank all of you for joining us today. I really appreciate your time. And as Vistage members, make sure you're registered for the National CEO Conference of the Year on Fiscal Health next Friday, May 21st. We'll have two keynotes, one from Karen G. Mills, former administrator of the U.S. Small Business Administration, who will offer a playbook for small business growth and success, and another from Jeff Colvin, 40-year senior editor-at-large for Fortune, discusses how to recalibrate to succeed in today's business climate. You can register at vistage.com/events. That's vistage.com/events. I thank you again for your time and attention. I trust you found this session as valuable and insightful as I did, and I wish you the very best going forward. Thank you very much for your time. Joe Galvin, Vistage Research. Thanks again.